couple of months ago, I was sent this message by Sommerbauer Cornell. Hi Daniel, I've just finished playing in the Isle of Wight under 2100 weekday tournament where I ended up in joint first. Well done, Ben. On the way, I played the Kalashnikov for the first time in one of my best games, inspired by your channel. Well, that's the kind of feedback I like to hear. I like how once d5 came, there was d-file domination, and that was enough. Let me know what you think. Well, I think it's a really good game and certainly worth showing. Thanks, Ben, for sending it to me. So a little bit of background info. Ben is 23 years old. He's been playing chess for 8 years and his current FIDE rating is 2014. Coming back to the game. So played in the Isle of Wight tournament under 2100s in mid-February. I've only just had time to take a look properly at it. And this game shows a classic theme that I mentioned in the book, and that is Liberation Station, where this backward d-pawn of black's manages to advance to d5, and that liberates black's pieces. And yeah, that's a theme that I discuss a great deal in the book. And funnily enough, the game follows one of the model games in the book for quite a few moves. And I mean, that's noteworthy in itself. I always like to collect model games when I'm researching an opening, researching it for courses, for books, and when I was playing professionally, that's something I used to do as well. Just collect classic games, and they give you a handle on strategy, because 9 times out of 10 the opening varies from the kind of lines you've been rehearsing, and at that point you need to have a good idea about overall strategy. So I think collecting model games is a really important part of learning and understanding an opening. Anyway, let's crack on with the game. It's good stuff. Let's look at the game from black's viewpoint, as it's a Kalashnikov. So Santos, who apparently is from Brazil, against Ben Sommerbauer Cornell, who is English. Now, Sicilian, and White goes for the open Sicilian and e5. So there are various alternatives here, these knight moves, but only knight b5 is a real test for black. And after d6, then that is the Kalashnikov. And White plays very sensibly, I would say. So, of course, there are two main moves here, c4 or knight c3. So knight c3. Now, given that knight d5 is coming, then black pushes the knight away. Now bishop e7. So why bishop e7, not knight f6? Well, knight f6 allows the pin for various reasons where I don't want to allow that, basically. I mean, it actually transposes to a Sveshnikov, but that's why we're playing bishop e7, to avoid that. And now knight c4, I think, is the best move, bringing the knight back from the side of the board into the middle. And black pushes that, and the knight comes back to e3. But notice that white has played so many moves with that knight. In the meantime, black has a slight lead in development, and that's useful. Now, main moves here are g3, and then bishop g2, or bishop d3 is also very popular. But knight d5 is also quite a popular move, just landing the knight on that outpost on d5. Castles and knight f6. In fact, this is quite a tame way for white to play, because actually black has very easy development. And this, I call this, in the book, I call this the breakout bishop. So this is a very important maneuver in the Kalashnikov. Basically, you can see the bishop isn't doing much, on f6, but once it comes to g5, then it's going to exchange off the dark square, white's dark square bishop, and then black finds it much easier to operate on the dark squares. c3 played to cover d4 and b4, so that's standard move, good move. An exchange, and bishop e6. So this is following a line that I give in the book exactly. And I mean, it's a very unpretentious way for white to play. But black is very comfortable here with sound development. Usually that's where you want the bishop, just keeping an eye on that knight. And black's next move is a very important part of Kalashnikov's strategy. You want to try and fight white's control of the knight on d5. Now, in this kind of position, you don't want to go f5, because that actually can be countered very easily. And it usually, in the end, it doesn't help black's king. White is usually solid enough. But this is very important, an absolutely standard strategy, fighting for control over d5. Now, if white is careless here and plays, for example, castles, then black is able to exchange favorably on d5, for example, like this. And this structure with this kingside overlap is great fun for black to play. So, I mean, this was one particular game that was played. You can see, I call this in the book, I call this the steamroller. These pawns are launched down the board, and with this pawn majority, backed up by the knight, the queen, the rook, then black has an excellent attack. So white does best to exchange off. And this position was reached in one of the model games in the book. And in that game, let me see what was played. Castles was played. The game went like this. And rook d8. c4. White obviously thought, okay, I want to prevent d5. Queen b7. Hitting the pawn, also looking at b2. But after this, already white was under pressure, and black managed to win that one. In this game, a3 was played. So, you know, white doesn't want to think any more about the possibility of this pawn being taken, so just moves it to a3. Queen b7. So, as in the game we've just looked at, the model game, the queen arrives at b7. I really like this square for the queen. It's looking in both directions here. So if queen takes d6, then queen e4 is already very powerful. You can see how I mentioned this lead in development. White is suffering here. And already this is extremely uncomfortable for white. Something like this. Queen here, just bring the queen back, just stop white castling. Black is better. So white decided just to castle instead. And now, of course, queen takes pawn will be met by bishop f3. And that's a nasty skewer. But instead, Ben goes for this move d6, d5, as I describe it in the book, liberation station. So this liberates black's pieces. So white hasn't got much better. I mean, you exchange. And there are certain advantages for black in playing like this. I mean, one thing is black can perhaps use the d file, but also means that black has this very nice kingside pawn majority. And later on, this can be very effective. I mean, particularly in the endgame. And there's a threat straight away to g2. Actually, that's a bit uncomfortable for white because, you know, either move, g3 or f3, is a bit of a compromise. I think white does best to play f3 here. I mean, it's not a very beautiful move as it blocks in the bishop, but if g3, this is actually very good for black with discovered attack threats, and rook d2 is already tremendous for black, and bishop h1 coming very soon. So f3 is played, and I think that's correct. But, well, it's obvious to the eye just that black is more comfortable than white. So black has a greater share of the center. You know, this pawn gives black more control in the center. And there's a threat here, so black has a very slight initiative. But, I mean, the question is, how do you make progress? I think this kind of position is a bit difficult for black to squeeze out a win, because if you exchange bishops, then basically major piece endgames, the drawing chances increase, even if you're on the defensive. And yeah, I mean, how do you swing this? I mean, Ben played rook e8. I think this is interesting because he's perhaps angling to play e4 to open up the diagonal. Queen f2 played, and it looks sensible. And now bishop c4, so that's a bit of a crafty move. You know, white doesn't really want to exchange, because then the rook might land on d3. That's a bit uncomfortable. And the b file opens as well. And you never know, e4 might be coming at some moment. So anyway, rook d1 played. Seems sensible to challenge the d file, but now, okay, change of strategy. Bishop b3, hitting the rook, and white exchanged. And you can see that black has control over the d file. So that happened very quickly. Queen e3 and queen d5. So white is under pressure. So it's worked out perfectly. This bishop beautifully placed on b3. Rook e1, queen d2. Why not? Why not go in? So if there's an exchange, then the rook lands on d2 and this pawn is dropping. So the rook is attacked. Bishop f1 is very sensible. Now, big moment for black. Ben played it safe and played f6, just maintaining that nice pawn chain, that nice center pawn. He could have plunged in with queen takes b2. This is quite a tempting move, because after queen e5, okay, watch out for the checkmate. Actually, queen a3 is fine for black. It's just an extra pawn. Now the computer thinks that white is still okay after queen b6, but it's kind of touch and go. And after, let's say, rook f8, thinks not queen a6, then queen c3, and black is doing very well. But queen a5, now whether white would have found this slightly strange move is another matter, but basically the computer thinks that white can still hold the position. Anyway, I think queen b2 was tempting, but f6, just holding the position, is very sound. And once again, queen b6, according to the computer, is good enough to hold. It's very tricky though. I mean, it's not a very natural move to leave that rook en prise. I appreciate that the queen attacks the rook. In any case, white played rook e2. And that was taken. And now rook d2 is played. Actually, rook d1 is more accurate, but and gives black a huge advantage. But rook d2 also looks very good. Okay, I think we need a think and drink moment here. It looks as though black is breaking through. But white still has a defense here. So if you were playing white in this position, how would you defend? So time for me to have a drink of my tea. Cheers. Time for you to have a think. White play. What's the best defense? Cheers. One board, endless ways to play chess. Open Chess Connect and your Supreme T2 becomes a training area. Solve puzzles from chess.com and sharpen your tactics directly on your board. Switch to ChessLink and you're instantly playing online on Lichess. Smooth, fast, just like over the board play. And when it's time to go deeper, connect to Chessbase or HiOx on desktop and analyse your games with professional tools. Training, online play, analysis, all on one board. The Supreme T2 adapts to how you play. That was a new video featuring my favourite chess set. I'll put the link to Millennium Computers down below if you're interested in exploring that. Now, back to this one. White is under massive pressure here. And the move played, rook e2, was actually a blunder. But it looks like the most natural move. But here, there's only one thing that'll pull you through, and that's calculation. Basically, rook d3 is the best move. Doesn't feel right, but the point is this. Rook takes b2, rook d6, and white has just enough counterplay to hold. I mean, it's most likely we're going to end up in a position with 4 against 3 on the king side. So, for example, bishop c4, an exchange of pieces and pawns. So basically these 2 pawns are going to be exchanged, and then black will have 4 against 3. Theoretically a draw, but white still has to work. Or what else? A5 takes rook here. And basically that pawn gives white enough counterplay. But instead rook e2 was played. But there's a problem. Rook d1. So white is getting pinned here. So bishop c4 is the threat. So rook f2 played, bishop c4. And white is in a real gum here. It takes time to unwind. g3 played. And now Ben just goes to take a pawn, and that results in a winning rook and pawn endgame. He could have been flash here and played this and gone for a pawn endgame, and this is actually winning because the king approaches. Basically, white hasn't time to create a pass pawn on the queen side, and eventually black is going to force a route in for the king, create a pass pawn, and basically it's all over, or threaten to create a pass pawn. But rook b1 is really pragmatic, very sensible, and is just taking a pawn on the queen side with a winning endgame. So it saves calculating, basically. Yeah, it's not just an extra pawn, it's the fact that black maintains an active rook. And this is absolutely hopeless. So black's threat is just to bring the king into the position and clean up on the queen side, or possibly just create a passed pawn through the middle. Depends how white defends. King f2 played, king f7. Black could take a pawn here, and another pawn, but this is also completely winning. If, let's say, I should say that white gave up a second pawn here, but if white waits, for example, like this, then e4, and the king just forces its way in, takes a pawn. I mean, it's just hopeless when white's rook is so passive, basically. So white gave up a second pawn, but it really doesn't change much. e4, okay, that opens up the third rank towards the g-pawn. Rook came back, and actually it's going to be possible to check and bring the king in. Now, okay, there's a bit of messing around. I mean, I think King G4 is actually very clean, but this really doesn't affect anything in the game. It doesn't change the result at all. Black is still winning this position. I just don't think it was necessary to sort of exchange pawns on the king side. But anyway, so one pawn is returned, but the pawn is so far advanced it really doesn't make any difference, and the king is able to transfer across the board. So this is how the game ended. And in this position, let me see, went rook f6, b2, but it is absolutely hopeless. Yeah, the rook, well, the rook can't even give itself up for the pawn now. Well, I think it was a really good game. The opening went well. Black got in the d5 advance, and the strategy carried on very smoothly into the middle game, controlling the d-file and then exploiting that to win a pawn and with a winning endgame. So yeah, incredibly smooth. So congratulations to Ben on winning first place in the tournament and on a superb debut with the Sicilian Kalashnikov. Great to see. So if any of you have a nice game that you've played with the Kalashnikov, or even a bad game, I don't know, but you'd like to show me, then do send it to me. You can contact me through my website, danielking.biz, and there's a contact box there. And well, I look forward to seeing your efforts, but that was a really, really nice game.